Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5. This episode, we're going to talk about my journey from medical school through residency and fellowship and how I came to the decision to go into facial plastic surgery. All right, everyone. So this is a very, very important transition for me from what we talked about in episode 4, and that I came into medical school 100% focused on the idea of becoming a world-class elite cardiothoracic surgeon. I thought all the things that happened along the way had happened to shape me and develop me into a career as a heart surgeon, so I could one day go on and do all the things that the particular heart surgeon that treated my mom did in saving her life, and I was going to do the same for other families and have that. So I was focused. I spent 4 years of my undergraduate years working side by side, etc. And when I started, I thought, everything that I'm going to do in the next 4 years of medical school is going to be, in this direction. And what's interesting about the story that I'm about to tell, and this is important for those of you who are, in the beginnings of your career, students, medical students, etc., that sometimes you may think you know exactly where things are going to go, and next thing you know, a certain set of events occur, and it derails the original plan, but the other plan might actually be better. So sometimes it's not a matter of being bummed out that certain things didn't work out the way they did, but in fact, it's for the better. And even though this wasn't the story I'm about to tell isn't exactly out of my control, but it does show the importance of being attentive to yourself, knowing yourself, knowing what's best for you, and being willing to make those changes, despite how you feel about certain things. So let me give you a specific sort of story about this. So I entered medical school, and I was going through my anatomy in the first year of medical school. Again, very focused on all the things we just talked about. And then at the very end, while we're doing the head and neck portion of our anatomy class, this facial plastic surgeon who had just finished his fellowship and had not much to do decided to volunteer with our anatomy class and also do a presentation on the field of facial plastic surgery. And again, I remember so disinterested in anything to do with anything other than hearts that I was sitting in the very back of my auditorium in the anatomy class and barely listening to this particular speaker, just because I thought it had nothing to do with what I was going to be doing. But his presentation slowly started capturing my attention. He had these images of these amazing operations that he was performing, from reconstructive to cosmetic to cancer to automobile deformities, congenital deformities being created. I mean, it was just broad. It was incredible how many things fit within this realm of facial plastic and reconstructive surgery. And by the end of the hour and a half presentation, I was glued and confused. I was legitimately confused because it sort of disrupted my original vision of what I thought was the absolute best career specialty you can have. So what's interesting about this is that I started to think about what characteristics I have that I would consider sort of my strengths or my interests or whatever it is. And one of the things is I from the very beginning of my life, I was very creative. I liked creating, beautiful place settings when we had dinner parties at our house. I enjoyed creating garnishes and pretty presentations of the food that I would either make or my mom would make, and I would present it in a very beautiful way. I enjoyed that process in addition to many other sort of creative outlets and opportunities. So there was a side of me that I knew was there, and I enjoyed the process of creativity, but I never thought I would be able to utilize it in a career, because heart surgery, brain surgery, all these things are very technical. They don't have the same sort of creative leeway, say, for example, that plastic surgery has. So I didn't even know that I would be able to utilize this. I always knew I'd like to work with my hands. I always knew that I wanted to be in a specialty, in a field that could have a high impact for people, and that there's an intrinsic level of stress that goes along with having to get it right every time. And I welcomed that. I enjoyed that. And that's kind of one of the things I liked about heart surgery, because it was life and death. And and with the field of facial plastic surgery, I realized that, number one, I could utilize my creative side, because there's so much variation in the types of procedures that are performed, and each individual face is so different that it really lends itself to the creative exploration of how to approach a face and the outcomes and everything else, and the planning. Number two, I knew that I would be held to an incredibly high technical standard, and that there was no room for error, because it's the face. How are you going to be able to hide a mistake? How are you going to be able to keep it from being revealed not only to the patient but to the rest of the world? So that required a tremendous amount of focus and dedication and attention and stress that I thought I liked. I wanted that as part of my responsibility for the individual. And then finally, it became clear, after seeing some of these examples and subsequently learning more about it, it became clear that the face means so much to an individual. It's literally what you present to the rest of the world. It's how you communicate with people. It is really you, by all intents and purposes and definition. It is what makes you unique and what makes you you. And all of that wrapped up became a very intriguing and interesting set of characteristics that I thought fit me perfectly. And I thought that would be really worth exploring and considering. So I spoke to my mentor back at UCSD, about this, and his perspective was that the field of cardiothoracic surgery, and this was in the 90s, mid to late 90s, was changing. It was becoming much more non-surgical, more non-invasive, with the cardiologist doing all these different things. So this was a time when it wasn't going to be the way it was in the field of cardiothoracic surgery. And when I heard that, in combination with my own interests, it led me to become much more interested in exploring these other fields. So I started working in the research department with a particular mentor of mine at UC Irvine, who took me under his wings and started to give me a chance to learn more about the profession while I was studying. And by the end of a 2 or 3 year period, it became incredibly clear that this is what I wanted to do. And by no means I wanted to do anything else. So I applied to residency in head and neck surgery, which is the perfect foundation for facial plastic surgery. And if you understand how the process works, you have to do a residency in something followed by a fellowship in facial plastic surgery. So that becomes your subspecialization. So I spent 5 years in head and neck surgery, and I decided to stay at UC Irvine, where they also had some of the most advanced facial plastic surgeons in the country, and being in Newport and Beverly Hills, all within my proximity, with a lot of great clinical mentors around, I knew that I would get a very, very good exposure to facial plastic surgery while I was doing my head and neck surgery residency. And it turned out to be a great decision for me, where I learned a lot of facial plastics even before I got into my subspecialty fellowship in facial plastic surgery. And those were great years of medical school and residency leading up to this point. And then the final step was to become a facial plastic surgeon. And to do that, you have to then go on and do a fellowship in facial plastic surgery. And for me, I knew the type of profession that I wanted to have. At that time, actually, I thought I was going to go into academic facial plastic surgery, and what that means is I thought I was going to be doing, working at a university hospital. I was going to be a professor. I was going to do research. I was going to teach, etc. And basically, I wanted to be in a program that had a good opportunity to learn reconstructive as well as cosmetic, and so I wanted a well-rounded facial plastic surgery experience. And I chose UC Irvine for my fellowship, where I stayed on. And in addition to it being a very good, well-rounded program, it also lent a very good opportunity for me to be able to see my own patients. And for those of you residents and future fellows who are out there, that's a very important consideration, because most fellowships you don't get a chance to actually operate on your own. And this particular fellowship at the time was incredibly hands-on, and I got a chance to see my own patients in clinic, schedule them for surgery, and basically build the beginnings of a practice through my fellowship. And it turned out to be a really great opportunity to take on that responsibility, operate on my own, learn from my own mistakes, learn just because you're not just assisting somebody else, but also really, really importantly, I created, by the end of that fellowship year, I had a thick book of before and afters, because I operated so much. I actually was fortunate enough to build an incredibly busy fellowship practice where I think every single surgical spot for the rest of the year was filled up by December. And I had patients, I was in Irvine, I had patients coming down from San Diego, coming down from San Francisco, Santa Barbara. I actually had patients were traveling for me to do these procedures for them. And at that time, I started to really understand, the unique aspects that I wanted to build in my practice. And those unique aspects were things like fat transfer, vertical facelifts, minimally invasive eye surgery. These were all the things that I had the opportunity to literally think about and learn, because for 11 years prior to that point is when I decided to go into facial plastic. I had all this time to focus and develop my thinking towards being a facial plastic surgeon. That was a huge advantage, because I didn't just walk into fellowship like a empty book and say, all right, teach me whatever I need to know during this period. I came in with a lot of ideas, a lot of unique theories and concepts that I was able to actually utilize during the fellowship year, as well as learn a lot from my mentors and my instructors, and put it all together for the next step, which was my final, finally getting out into practice. But it was an incredibly fulfilling, very rich journey, and a really great opportunity to hone and develop. And I think that early decision for me led to a lot of success later on, because again, I had a major runway before I got into practice, which is what we'll talk about in the next segment. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions at all, please make sure you jot them down in the comment section. And to get the next episode and many more like this in all aspects of facial plastic surgery, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks so much.